Okay, so let's have a look at The Road Not Taken by the wonderful American poet Robert Frost. This is another poem that has been requested. And again, as I said, I can't and I'm not going to analyze every poem that every teacher is doing in class, but I'm trying to facilitate you. I don't know how many poems we've done now, but this is another one to add to the catalogue that some of you may be studying. It's an interesting poem if you look at the structure of the poem, and I think that's always something that's worth considering when analysing a poem. You can see that we've got 4 stanzas, and each stanza has 5 lines, and that means that the stanzas are technically called quintains. It's good to have knowledge of the vocabulary of poetry. When you look at each quintain, you'll notice something. First of all, you've got would, both, stood, could, growth. Now that means that the first, third, and fourth lines rhyme, and the second and the fifth line rhymes. Let's have a look and see, does that also repeat itself in the second stanza? Fair, claim, where, there, same. Yes, it does. What about the third stanza? Lay, black, day, way, back. And then the last stanza, sigh, hence, I, by, difference. Now that means that the writer has created a rhyming scheme. And the rhyming scheme technically is A, B, A, B. In other words, first, second, and then third and fourth rhyme with first, fifth rhymes with second. A, B, A, B. You'll never have to know that. You'll never have to write that down. If you're a poet yourself and you like to write, those are things you want to concern yourself about. If you're just trying to prepare for your junior cycle poetry section, all you have to say is that the writer employs a rhyming scheme, and the rhyming scheme effectively adds rhythm to the poem, giving it a fluency that you admire. Speaking of rhythm, you'll notice that each line contains 9 syllables. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And that goes on throughout the poem. Let's pick a line from the second stanza. Let's look at the third line. Because it was grassy and wanted where? Oh, hold on. There's 10 syllabic beats in that one. Let's pick another line. What about the last line from the second stanza? Had warned them really about the same. What about the third stanza? Let's go for this line. Yet knowing how way leads on to way. What about the last stanza? Let's pick this line. Somewhere ages and ages hence. So you can see that the poet has deliberately written the poem so that each line has approximately 9 syllabic beats. Now, I'm not going to get into the technicalities of that, because if you want to get really bored or get really confused, try getting into talking about things like anapestic trimeter, which is what it's written in. You don't have to know that. All you have to know is that the poet has written the poem, designed the poem to be written in a particular meter. And when we're talking about the beats of lines in poetry, sorry, no. We spell meter like that, METER. And there's a paragraph. So if you're asked to pick a poem that you've studied in which the poet uses techniques in an interesting way, you can talk about The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost, and you can talk about how Robert Frost in The Road Not Taken employs rhyming and meter, has a very strict stanza structure. Each stanza is a quintain for 20 lines of poetry, and that you like the way that combination of those techniques gives the poem a structure, a rhythm, a fluency, a musicality. There's loads to say. Now, sorry, I'm not feeling very well, and my yeah. Anyway, So let's keep going. Struggling with the old breath. So it's a deeply philosophical poem. And in the poem, the poet uses nature imagery in order to explore a pretty big philosophical issue. It's about choices and the fact that life is full of choices and that we have no certainty um, about how those choices will affect our lives. So the poem is extremely thoughtful and reflective. It is built around an extended metaphor of a crossroads. And that metaphor of the crossroads represents a universal truth. About the uncertainty of life. Let's read the poem. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood. And sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveller. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Now that is an important little symbol. So we have the idea, if you think about the dramatization, the poet is using a narrative approach here, which means storytelling. He's giving us this character in this place, these adjective noun combination, helping us visualize the scene. It's a yellow wood, so we're in a wood. It's a forest or a woodland, and it's autumnal. So we're kind of, because the leaves are yellow, we're at that time of the year, so it's a little bit cold. And he's standing there, and he's looking down one road as far as he can. Now, he can only look down so far. Excuse me, because the road bends away. And what he's doing here is he's creating this dramatized scene to try to communicate how in our lives we reach junctions where we have to make decisions, and we consider those decisions really deeply and carefully, and we look at the consequences of those decisions as far as we can, but we can't really see, we don't really know what is around the corner. If we choose that, if we make that choice, we can see the short term, just as he can see the road until it gets to the bend, but we can't see the long term, and that's the bend around the corner. And that's an example of what we call figurative language or symbolism. In the second stanza, he describes how he made a decision. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. Now again, what's interesting there is that when he made his choice, there was really no discernible difference between the two choices. So the only factor he could see which influenced him was that other people had not been down one road as much as they had been down another. Now, is that complicated? Well, here's what it is. Frost is talking about the idea of individuality, of not following the same path as everybody else, of actually making the choice to be different, of identifying difference as something which is attractive, not something which is frightening. So that's why he goes down the road. And again, the dramatization of two paths, one of which has been um, trodden a lot and the other of which hasn't. That's a metaphor. And it represents him in his life, wondering what he's going to do with his life. And asking himself, do I want to go down the same path as everybody else? Or do I want to choose a path which I feel suits my individuality? So really, really, really reflective, very personal, very thoughtful. And not only is it personal to Frost, but it's also then, and this is what the great poets do, it's also relatable by all of us. So it has a universal quality. And both that morning equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. And then this wonderful moment. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. Now again, the insights here are really important. He's thinking about regret. He's thinking about the impact of life choices. He's thinking about how if you take one road, you think, well, I might go back and take the other road another day. But you take one road, you come to another junction, you have a different decision, and then you go that way, and then you might go that way, and then off you go. And it's very hard to get back to this point and that road because your life is heading in that direction. So he's talking about the idea that when we live our lives, we are always given options, choices. And sometimes we'd like to take both options, but we can't. And therefore, regret is a part of life experience. Frost was a man who had a number of careers in his life. He was a farmer, he was a teacher, and he was a poet. These were all things he enjoyed doing. But when you choose one, you leave the other one behind. And that's what he means when he says, knowing how way, pathway, roadway, decision leads on to way. And then we have this lovely, lovely, lovely use of onomatopoeia in the final stanza. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and and then he repeats I like the repetition of I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. That final line contains an element of ambiguity. He doesn't say whether the decision he made all the difference in a good way or in a bad way. For me, when he writes this poem, he's in the later stages of his life. That's why the wood is yellow. It's autumn. He's an older person, maybe my age, looking back on his life and the decisions that he's made. But he knows that that decision that he made at that moment in his life, for me, it's the decision to become a poet, to commit his life to his art and craft. To me, that ending should have an exclamation mark. Because for me, it's an uplifting ending. It's an ending where there is satisfaction. But then why the sigh? Because the sigh is about regret. The sigh is about the missed opportunities of life that we look back on. And of course, this is the truth of the poem. The poem is not the poet saying, ha, look at me, I made great decisions, I'm a winner, yay. He's not saying that. He's also not saying, oh, woe is me, I made terrible decisions, what a fool I am, I'm a loser. The tone of the poem is not emotional. There is no sense of extreme joy, celebration, nor is there any sense of extreme despair and misery. What there is reflection. What there is a thoughtful tone in which a writer thinks about the decisions he made in his life and how those decisions have led him to the place he is today, have led his life to the position he finds himself in today. And of course, that is the truth of all of our lives. So I apologize if that was a bit crap. I'm honestly not feeling very well at all, even as I tried to go through this. But I hope you found that in some way useful. Thank you.